start.
Bruce Hall, CBS News at the Kennedy Space Center.
There was so much happiness this morning, so much excitement. The only tears were tears of joy, the parents of schoolteacher Krista McCullough standing proud as their daughter and the others lifted off.
Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
But in just 1 minute and 12 seconds, all the joy and all the excitement was dead, extinguished in a flash.
Maximum heartbreak, torn up inside. This is the emotional part. And immediately the reporter begins to ask, what the hell went wrong?
And in the small towns that surround the Space Center, America's tragedy was their personal tragedy.
I saw it, I watched it, I cried. I couldn't believe it.
I came outside and I said, there it goes. And I watched it go up, and then suddenly, boom.
It's a great loss. The life, the knowledge, surely.
There were 7 victims who died today, and millions of others who still live.
Velocity 2,900 feet per second.
I'm sad. I've cried, and I will cry again. I really will. I'm sorry.
Bernard Goldberg, CBS News, Cocoa Beach, Florida.
Now, using our scale model of the Shuttle Challenger and slow-motion stop-action videotape of the accident in space, let's try to go over once again just what happened. First to the model. You can see that the Challenger on either side has the solid rocket boosters, the tanks that hold the rubber-like solid fuel. The large orange tank is the main liquid fuel tank. Now, we'll rotate the model just a bit to roughly the position the Challenger was in just before the explosion. What we're seeing now is stop-action footage of the mission, just about 1 minute and 11 seconds in. We see the shuttle and one of the solid rocket boosters. At this point, a small flame leak is already visible in between. As we roll this ahead in slow motion, another flame leak appears above about 1 second later. Then, scant tenths of a second later, a large clear flame, and then the last massive explosion. The Challenger enveloped in a terrible fireball over the next 3 seconds. Finally, just past 1 minute and 14 seconds, you can see one of the solid rocket boosters blown aside in the top right-hand corner of the screen, the booster shooting off away from the fireball. The 7 crew members aboard Space Shuttle Challenger today were Spacecraft Commander Francis R. Dick Scopey, 46, born in Washington State. He flew combat in Vietnam. The pilot today was 40-year-old Michael Mike Smith, born in Beaufort, North Carolina, a naval aviator and test pilot who'd flown 28 different kinds of aircraft. Judith Resnick, 36, hometown Akron, Ohio, an electrical engineer who earlier became this nation's 2nd woman in space. 35-year-old Ronald McNair. He held a doctorate from MIT. He was a scholar from Lake City, South Carolina. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Ellison Onizuka, who was from Hawaii. He was 39 and last year took part in America's first manned military space flight. 41-year-old Gregory Jarvis, a native of Detroit. He was bumped from Columbia's December flight to today's Challenger flight to make room for Congressman Bill Nelson as a congressional observer. And the 7th member of this crew was Krista Corrigan McAuliffe, the 37-year-old schoolteacher and mother of 2 from Concord, New Hampshire. What started as a party at Concord High School today ended in tears as students watching the launch learned about as hard a lesson as life offers. Steve Young was in Concord.
4, 3, 2,
About 300 Concord High School students had gathered to watch the launch of their star social studies teacher. It took a minute to realize that what they were watching was a disaster.
Like to hear about it or not?
Students were dismissed about an hour later, still no.
Everybody's just like, they're all just falling apart, all the teachers and everything.
I don't ever want to go there. It's been proven unsafe.
Afterward, the principal said guidance counselors will try to help students anguished by the tragedy.
They're telling kids in particular that it's okay to feel bad about this. It's okay to be sorrowful. It's okay to cry.
McAuliffe was one of the most popular teachers at Concord High. Students followed her training every step of the way. the 37-year-old mother of two hoped to show by her example that space is a world open to anyone.
One of the things that I hope to bring back into the classroom is to make that connection with the students that they too are part of history, that the space program belongs to them.
We were with them on Saturday night, and her little girl said to me, "Is Mommy in space yet?" And I said, "No, not yet, pretty soon." And everybody was just so happy. Everybody was so thrilled that out of 11,000 teachers, Krista was the one that was selected.
There were mostly empty streets in Concord today and deserted shops as the town began to move.
I just watched it over again. It happened again. Very sad for the family and everybody.
One friend took a picture of Krista during a town celebration last summer. She picked it up just today, left with a photo and her greeting. Steve Young, CBS News, Concord.
Besides the symbolism of putting school teacher Krista McAuliffe aboard today's flight to be the first public citizen American civilian in space, to spread the wonder and to inspire and teach the young back on Earth on live television, this Challenger mission had other goals in keeping with its reusable space plane, space truck workhorse role. It was supposed to put up a $100 million satellite that would have become part of NASA's own shuttle communications network. It was also supposed to launch a $10 million payload to study Halley's Comet. Coming up next, Leslie Stahl has the latest on President Reagan's postponement of his State of the Union address, and Bob Simon will look at our space voyaging nation in a state of shock.
Ever try borrowing for something unusual?
Had an experiment aboard the ill-fated shuttle. It was an attempt to grow beans in space.
I heard about it. I thought it had landed, but then I heard that it had blown up, and that just kind of collapsed, put my hands on my head, and I was really worried about it.
Today's space shuttle mission was one of historic significance because it marked the first time a teacher, a civilian, was going up in space. It'll probably still go down in the history books, but it'll be for all the wrong reasons. Mike Barajas, Channel 2 News.
Well, after all is said and done, as has already been observed, propelling men and women through the air is not always safe, even though it has sometimes proven to be that way in the past. It can be dangerous. Men and machines are not perfect. And before the next shuttle mission, if there is to be one, there will no doubt be much weighing of the risks involved. Ron, Jan?
Thank you very much, Bill.
As you can imagine, there are very strong feelings of shock and disbelief tonight among the many people who work at the Johnson Space Center, who have invested their time, their talent, and their considerable caring in the space program. Shortly after the Challenger exploded this morning, we talked to some of the NASA employees and also to some of the visitors touring the Space Center.
Well, obviously everybody's stunned. I'm sort of numb right now.
It looked good at first. After the explosion, there's just a very silence everywhere.
Never expected anything of that magnitude. You know, you always plan for contingencies, but you just, you never can foresee the future.
When we come back, more on how Houstonians are reacting to the fatal explosion of Challenger.
Including a visit with some youngsters who learned one of life's valuable lessons today.
One taste of Rainbow Family Recipes bread, and you'll know why Grandma is throwing away her bread pans.
Wild, untamed power. It's the TNT Hot Rod Pull Super National. Presented by Pettigrew Smith Auto Supply, February 7th and 8th in the Astrodome. See the once-a-year showdown of the most powerful sport on Earth. Watch Pettigrew Smith's own monster truck in action. You may win your own monster truck. Yes, Pettigrew Smith is giving away this street-legal custom Ford Bronco Monster. Register at any of the 52 Pettigrew Smith stores or at the TNT Hot Rod Pull Super National.
Finger's tremendous buying power brings you an exclusive once-in-a-lifetime special purchase. Famous Burlington has discontinued it. God.
Space Agency officials waited most of the day before saying anything, and when they did speak, it was only to say they won't say anything until and unless they know for sure what happened, what went wrong. David Martin reports the investigation, day one.
NASA doesn't know what happened.
And neither do the makers of these white solid rocket boosters, which helped lift the shuttle from the launch pad.
I don't believe there's sufficient evidence on the replays to be able to ascertain the nature of the problem.
Or the makers of the orange external fuel tank, which carried 500,000 pounds of highly volatile liquid hydrogen and oxygen.
What we have is what you see on television, and it's very hard to tell anything from that.
While investigators search for answers, there is only speculation by informed observers about the apparent leak which touched off the giant fireball, dwarfing the remains of one of the 140-foot solid rocket boosters.
It appears that there were some burn-throughs and some flame leaks coming out, and once this extremely hot
might make your
up to the minute with the explosion of the external tank.
But another expert said that alone could not have caused the massive fireball.
The very large explosion that took place would have to have involved the propellants in this large tank.
The hydrogen and oxygen.
Hydrogen and oxygen in that tank.
What could have caused the external tank to fail like that? Could it have been unexpected weather conditions high in the atmosphere?
Winds aloft looked good. We didn't have any exceedances as far as our load indicators are concerned, to my knowledge, and we thought everything was in good shape for a launch this morning.
Could it have been the ice which coated the shuttle just hours before launch? Most observers say no, since the launch was delayed to allow the ice time to melt.
Right now, there are many more questions than answers. Until the investigators can come up with both answers and solutions, no more Americans will venture into space. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.